Finance Act 2021, which has increased excise duty. Now, the tax measures are meant to boost revenue collection for funding of the country's 3.6 trillion shilling budget. But at what cost? Our Brenda Kirubo tells us more.
Mobile phones. We can't live without them, and airtime is now considered a basic need. But you will have to dig much deeper into your pocket for that phone call or making payments such as parking and license fees. This is because telecommunication operators have increased the costs of accessing such services after a rise on telephone and internet data from 15% to 20%. Airtel has increased its voice tariff to 2 shillings and 78 cents per minute. Safaricom is yet to implement.
Mimi msanii niko natumia like 20 bob kununua data na inanisaidia kupost kwa Instagram video zangu za ngoma, Facebook. Sasa wakipandisha itakuwa ngumu bado kwangu kia. Juu bado unajua mimi bado mimi si huko fiti yani.
As for me, I also do calls and I call my clients, you see. So ikifika sasa data imeongezeka alafu tena credit iongezeke, like actually it will really affect me.
Nitaopti kutotumia simu. Kwa sababu sasa sitaweza. Kwa sababu sasa kama mawasiliano unajua sasa kulingana na hali ya technology na vile mambo ni lazima tuwe compliant na technology, then itakuwa very hard.
Saa hii unaona mshahara wangu yenye ninachukua inalipa mambo ya school fees, fanya mambo mengine. Alafu hawa wanaleta vitu vingine, unnecessary things. Sisemi they are unnecessary. They are necessary, but not at this time. Wakati wa mtu wamefinywa na mambo mengi, mashida mengi, COVID-19 and everything.
Operators argue the increment will in turn affect internet access and penetration levels in the country, since it will be costly. This is the second time the government is increasing communication costs. In 2018, excise duty increased from 10% to 15% in the Finance Act 2018. At the same time, commercial banks have also notified their customers on an increment in loan-related fees and commissions. NCBA's notice shows the decision is linked to an excise duty at the rate of 20%. National Treasury has introduced a raft of new tax measures for the Kenya Revenue Authority targeting individuals and businesses as it seeks to raise revenues badly hit by COVID-19 restriction measures. Brenda Kirubu, KTN News.
Well, so that's the latest. The raft of measures will definitely be implemented in the course of this particular week. Just looking at today's daily, by the way, the Standard on page 7, Safaricom have a customer notice following the government's move to adjust excise duty on airtime to 20% from 15%. We have reviewed our product and service pricing. So the cost of all-out bundles, voice calls and data will be revised to reflect the increased excise duty, while there's reprieve in terms of data bundle prices, which remain unchanged right there. But also roaming and international calling, SMSs, have been revised, as well as the cost of all fiber to home and fiber to business plans have also been revised to reflect this new excise duty. So that's the latest. Joining me in studio, Martins Owino, Member of Parliament, Dhiwa constituency, also joined by Sakwa Bunyasi, Member of Parliament, Nambale constituency, and Kevin Osido, governance expert. Osido, I'd like to begin with you before we cross over to the parliamentarians, because a couple of parliamentarians have received heat. On one side, some of them were calling for the reduction. We want the reduction of these taxes. Yet Parliament itself has the power, and they've come under criticism from the church. As Trix mentioned, NCCK disappointed that parliamentarians amended and passed the Finance Bill 2021 with little regard of the impact it will have on the households. Osido, what's your take on this debate?
Sadly, hypocritical. Because what changes are being effected right now, Jesse, are changes that were basically at the floor of the House in 2013, when the first discussions around income tax and the review of taxation measures and the general tax regime were actually discussed. And it has always continued to come up, particularly when we have just a few weeks or months after the budget process. Now, what we have failed to do as a country is to focus on government expenditure and enhance our value addition and also on-source revenue for county governments. Yeah. And all these things just still boil back to the parliamentarians, because it is their responsibility and role to ensure that we have proper, effective laws that are supposed to safeguard both the interests of the citizens while also meeting the expectations of the government to be able to raise revenue through taxes, because taxation is one of those particular revenue sources. I have also had some parliamentarians accusing government, particularly those that are aligned to the party that is not within in government. And the question that begs is, where did they vote when this issue came up at the floor of the House? They supported the bill, and that is why it is being effected right now. My prayer and cry is that let parliamentarians focus on the interests of the citizens, even as we also seek to ensure that government is enabled, because Parliament enables government to perform its responsibilities as executive by putting in place proper legal frameworks and legislative measures that will therefore effect what government wants to implement. But when we see a lot of this now being taken away from the citizens, particularly at a time as this, Jesse, where we have global coronavirus that is eating up to the little that we have in our homes, I don't think it would be right for government to make it so difficult for citizens to survive, because as it is right now, the cost of living has gone up. We are not seeing stimulus packages that are being put in government, and that is the kind of discussion that I had expected to see in Parliament, where they are pushing the CS Treasury to put in place proper stimulus packages that are going to safeguard, the economy, both at the national level and counties also coming up, and also ensuring that we have, avenues to raise resources through employment creation. Most of our companies in this country, the industrial estates, are actually going down. We are seeing job losses, and every time I listen to the CS Security Attorney, I really I shed tears, because he keeps talking about job losses, job losses, job losses, and the sectors that are supposed to also guarantee these kind of jobs are also being closed. The question then that begs is, when is Parliament going to sit with the CS? I see them summoning governors from Senate perspective. I have seen the Public Accounts and the Investments Committee also asking other state and public officers to appear before it. When are we going to have a conversation between Parliament and the CS Treasury, so that we can be given very proper, effective measures that government is putting in place to ensure that citizens are not milked? Like I normally say, it's like milking a cow that you have not fed. Okay. You are closing all the opportunities for revenue generation while expecting this cow to be giving you more. So that's what I think is happening between our government and Kenyans, which I don't think is a very progressive way of raising revenue. And lastly, Jesse, corruption. We must deal with corruption. Okay. Those avenues where resources are being taken away from Kenyans, we must ensure that those gaps are sealed and are closed. People who have stolen public money need to be arrested and asked to repatriate back those resources to the government, so that we see services being delivered and citizens are not being pushed so hard to be able to ensure that government is spending.
Exactly. We'll get to converse that corruption topic, because there has been an exchange of words between the political class, especially over the weekend. But let's give the members of parliament a chance to come out clean. I'll be the devil's advocate this time round, Meshimiwa. Let me start with Martin Zowino. Of course, you did step back on the borders in the Finance Bill 2021. So there's sort of reprieve, but Kenyans are still asking. More needs to be done, and the fingers are being pointed at parliamentarians.
Yes, but we are also churchgoers. So I was looking for my representative there. But I hope the church can go back to the Mfungano, time, where they could get issues analyzed very well. What they are portraying here, blaming MPs for taxation and at the same time dipping their head in BBI, they're so mixed up. But I want to try to explain to Kenyans what we have done, especially in the telecommunication. The idea was to generate money from Safaricom, Telcom, and Airtel. And we were targeting 8 billion to go to the exchequer so that this can be used to cushion Kenyans. What we are not going to accept is that these companies are passing on the baton to the consumers. If there is an intervention to be done, we will do that. Because if you look at the profit margin that these organizations are making, it's huge. In fact, this is not even going to dip into 5% or something, because it's a hard time for everybody. I listen how those people were talking, and I relate. If you are gagged on your communication, it's going to affect the business. It's going to affect how people build social capital, which is good, a good cushioning when it is at this time of corona. How to speak to another person is very good. Otherwise, if you don't speak, you're lonely, you may end up in a clinical setting as a sick person. So we did that with a purpose to get more money into the treasury so that it can be used to cushion Kenyans. And I think Usindo is right here. Once we have taxed Kenyans or organizations or companies, and we have the money, there's another animal that eats it, which is corruption. This is where we should stand up and fight. Because if we don't do that, even taxing them will not be of any use. But let me also make a point to the companies that are going to be taxed. If businesses are flourishing because they can easily communicate and afford, you will get more people subscribing to your organization. So me, as a parliamentarian, I stand with what we did. It was the right thing to do. Other things which were going to affect the people directly, we said no, like the bakers, gagging them not to claim for their refund was going to increase the price of the bread. We said no, and border and all that. What we are not going to allow, Rogers, is for these companies to pass down the expenditures to the consumers. That one, even if we have to have another act, we will do it. Or even if we have to cap their profits so that they don't become so greedy, we will have to do it, because that is where the point is now, that the consumers fear we are going to pay more than what we are paying now, and it is a very difficult time for everybody.
Well, we'll definitely monitor what Parliament does about that. Sako Bunyasi, add your voice to this, because I was just buying a 6 kg cylinder of cooking gas. Previously, I'd buy it at 950. Right now, the price has gone by roughly 300 Kenya shillings up to around 1250. So the purchasing power of households is definitely being affected. And you've explained time and time again how quick cash flow is used in terms of targeting these avenues of revenue. Data can easily get money for the government, but at the end of the day, Kenyans are definitely complaining. Well, what's your take on this as a parliamentarian?
Okay, I'll have a slightly different opinion, approach.
Okay.
We may end up about the same place with my colleague. I was looking at it this way, that governments should only tax to finance development. Sustain and finance the maintenance and the sustenance and the expansion of the economy to some extent in terms of basic services that can't be done by the private sector. And in Kenya, we have never had for a long time any sort of tax resistance other than by business lobby groups and some expert lobby groups that feel have been targeted. I think there is the question, like you could say, overall, the country can reach a point of overtaxing its citizens. What is overtaxing? When the taxpayers do not think that the taxes yield any benefits, no corresponding services come to them, or in some cases when incomes like during this corona period have dropped so much, and the services that they depend on, government also wants to depend on those services to raise revenue, now cost an increasing share of their income at home. This time around, and I think my colleague will agree with me, the only time we have a robust debate is during the contribution in the 3 hours or so, or slightly more actually in the case of the budget and the finance bill, several days, that we focus on it. I guess it helps the country to focus on it. I think we need to have a broader dialogue out there. For example, I think that the position of the church leaders who are stakeholders like many other people, next time might be the teachers, the business class and so on, must voice their concerns on it. Part of it lies in the size of budget we we are pursuing now, 3.6 trillion, sounds very good for Kenyans. People think that'll be goodies all over the place, but it doesn't quite work like that. We are in an era in which we are financing chunky infrastructure, and the benefits that accrue from that chunky infrastructure are slow. They don't come they come in bits incrementally. So therefore people not, while they might see highways in Nairobi, see the double-decker roads, first of all, the person in Turkana, the person in Busia, in the next 20 years, they may not be in Nairobi, they will never see that double-decker road. And Nairobi people will be impressed to some extent, but only the center of the artery. The arteries in the suburbs where the city is growing fast will not be directly affected.
Yeah.
So the benefits don't accrue into the economy as well as it would have been expected. Yet the taxpayers are feeling the pinch. Somebody has a theory that in fact if you lower your taxes, you collect more of them. Of course, the economists can justify that very clearly, and many people also will do that. Compliance increases, your collection rates get higher. When we reduced the VAT, the drop was not equal mathematically to what they were getting before, less the 2%. No, in fact, the collection 14% as a return on the rate was higher than when you had 16%. Yeah. So lowering taxes is not necessarily a negative thing. And I think the taxpayers can reach a point where they can object. If, for example, the excess taxes are very high in the telecommunication sector, users will cut back what they use, how they use it. And you might find that, in fact, the revenues collected maybe are not as high as government had expected it would be. That's one. And therefore, government can also look at what is it we are spending on that we can delay, that we can be more efficient. I have been battling with the issue of getting a careful analysis of what goes into our budget, how it's then deployed, so that when you do that, you can calculate, and that's the only way we are trying to do so, you can calculate what you expect will be the outputs at the end. But if it's sort of just a whole mix, you can only do that now as, we say ex post, as at the end of the period, looking back, which is also useful for planning. So I really think there are sort of facets to this. Yes, we must pay taxes, however we do so. But yes, we are going to have to object, we as citizens. Parliament must become more conscious of the public policy implications of the taxes they pass. Parliament has shifted its position to finance the executive's needs, sometimes not with sufficient criticism or an element of reluctance, I would say. I think we have been very eager to sort of fund government, and without asking the questions, really, must we do this? And many countries are battling with this problem. We are just getting into the era in which we should have the discussion on the table. Do you have to finance what? Do we have to pay for what you are seeking to do as a government? Is that the best combination? Can they delay anything that would delay implementation so that ease of how much money they must raise? Remember, it's not just taxes. A lot of it is debt also. And the debt taxes are also going to pay debt. And some of the debt we are getting, if you do any simple calculations, I'm sure my colleague can do that very quickly, we are funding recurrent expenditure. We have reached a point where we are not restraining it where it should be. Yeah. I think we need a rethink. This is not the time to rethink because we're going into elections, I understand that. We're going to have to go to a certain script as we get into the elections. But we must get time in which we can step back.
Well, Osido, add your voice to this, because new tax measures are set to spur inflationary prices right now. And on one side, of course, we're being told kulipa ushuru ni kujitegemea. We know the importance of paying taxes, but we're dealing with a population that feels the impact of their taxes is not felt, and issues to do with corruption comes up. What do you think is a solution, a lasting solution to this an ever issue in terms of corruption?
Jesse, that statement by KRA is a facade in my view, because sioni namna wa Kenya wanajitegemea sababu services are not being properly delivered. Basic sense of it is health, for example. You walk into a health facility and you cannot live there without spending even 20 shillings because you have to either buy a notebook. Sometimes you are told, nenda pale ununue kalamu. Why? When we are talking about big four, and one of those big four is universal health coverage. You go meet the nurse, the doctor, then you are told, pole, hatuna hii dawa, utavuka barabara, uende ununue dawa pale. It must not be done like that in my view. And then you skip that and begin to tax Kenyans. So my basic response to that question in one part is, let the taxes speak for themselves. Can Kenyans relate to what the taxes are doing? In this country, for instance, Mheshimiwa Sakwa has just been talking about infrastructure, but you walk around Nairobi, and I have done that like last weekend. I went into Eastlands, very nice, photos by NMS, and I was asking people, hii barabara ilikuwa vipi kabla itengenezwe na NMS? We are recarpeting roads that, were already budgeted for, and we should have held accountable both the engineers and the project officers, whether they are politicians or people who are tasked with the responsibilities of ensuring that those roads are done, so that we don't repay for those kind of services that people should have expected. Nairobians, for the last 4 years, have not had water running on their taps. People are spending more than 70 shillings per jerrycan, Jesse. These are services that government should be coming out and bragging and saying, lipa ushuru, alafu, uone services. But that is not what is happening. So if we can be able to spend time, invest much more energy in attaching the tax regime to service delivery, and then communicating in terms of the effect of what we are saving as opposed to what we are losing as a country, then I think that will excite more Kenyans even want to pay taxes. Talk about education sector, for example. Parents are being asked to pay more. In fact, as we are moving into the first tranche of, they are called early learners of fourth grade, grade 4, it's going up. The fee structures are being almost doubled, if not tripled. That, in my view, is not proper, judicious, efficient management of resources, particularly in a country where you expect to increase taxes and people cannot necessarily relate to how these services are being done. So, to the question on corruption, I believe that, of course, I've heard some politicians saying when they get into power, they will arrest corrupt people. Why can't we begin that process now and use the institutions that we have to bring back resources that have been stolen by people who have stolen those monies? Arrest them, because we have very strong institutions like EACC, DCI, DPP must, in my view, should and must do their work, so that we begin to ask Treasury, how much money have we recovered from corruption? How are we going to use those resources not only to salvage Kenyans, but also to cushion the greater majority of where the gaps are within which corruption is manifesting? Because it's therefore difficult, Jesse, to even talk about in some of these town hall meetings that we go to tell Kenyans to pay more when they cannot be able to see people being arrested, and they also cannot be able to relate to the general effect of services being delivered to them. So it's quite a difficult congruence, especially when it comes to that KRA theme of running around telling Kenyans to pay so that tujitegemee tukilipa uhuru wetu. I think tukilipa ushuru wetu. I think it is a difficult conversation.
Okay, let's talk about corruption. Martins, what's your take on this? Because I'm looking at the headlines. Kenya could lose out on 48 billion Kenya shillings from the Global Fund if it does not complete the KEMSA scandal probe. Just to show perhaps how corruption is deeply entrenched in the society and the cost at which it comes, especially to the mass population. Well, what's your take on this? Is the independent institutions partisan in this fight against corruption? Because these are claims that have surfaced time and time again, especially now this close to the election.
No, it's true, Rogers. There is a wild horse running around which is unbaited, and that's going to eat a lot of our potentials. For example, KEMSA issue. I sit in the Committee of Health, and our recommendation was very strong, and for those we found culpable. Up to now, there's no action which can be associated with the donor satisfaction or any partner satisfaction. Because we are the three legs of government here, legislators do not arrest people. just want to tell Mr. Sinde, we don't arrest people. Yeah. We legislate and we oversight. And when we come with recommendations, we would like the executive, where all those institutions lie, to take action. And immediate action really inspire confidence in the people we do business with. Like now we have got almost 48 billion from Global Fund to do healthcare services, HIV, TB and all that. If that money is not used properly, it's a grant to begin with. So this idea of thieving is an animal we have to deal with very, very strongly. But more than that, what is killing me and my people in Dewa is borrowing for development. And it's, especially now, let's talk about infrastructure. We have wonderful highways. They are coming up. But you go to my constituency, you cannot find these enablers. A farmer cuts down the cane, cannot even reach the factory, because we are dealing with highway and we are not dealing with no ways where you can move. And these same people are supposed to be taxed to pay foreign debts. So where do they become motivated to fit in the analogy of that KRA? Because the idea of paying taxes was to collect as much as you can from the citizenry and then use them to put in enablers, the power, the water, the schools, the health centers. If these are missing in the 75% of the population who lives in the rural setting, and you build highways in the cities and the urban areas, you are doing what we call social injustice. And that's why people are enraged. Because you are sick, you want to be taken to a hospital. It rained, the roads are impossible, you can't reach there, and at the same time you are taxed by the county government and the national government. That is where we fail. If only we can be equitable with whatever we get across the country, then we will even inspire our people and even pay more taxes because the income will be up. So we are dealing with two things here in closing. One, we are not pretty with our partners because of the corruption. And I take it from the president, and he was right. He's a honest president that talks his mind. That every day we have 2 billion are being stolen. And these are taxes that comes from Wanjiku, Wanyango, and Amina. So how do those taxes get back to them if they are stolen? If we can seal, I don't know how, we may need a different paradigm shift in dealing with these thieves to make them respond to the needs of people. But that is where the thing is. And I said, even when we get this 8 billion from the telecommunication firms, it is still having that risk of being misused. As oversights, our hands are also, caught up when we recommend and you don't prosecute. We see still criminals to be bragging around and there's nothing done. It's sickening, but we are not giving up.
Okay, Mesako, add your voice to the fight against corruption. I don't know, politicization of this whole anti-graft war is definitely a weak link. Just last week, we're perhaps borrowing good pointers from South Africa in terms of the former South African President Jacob Zuma, court orders directing for his imprisonment. But later on, just this week, I saw various people camping at his house mentioning that, the mtu wetu mentality, that type of thing. So what do you think should we do in order to boost this fight against corruption in a way that will totally end this scourge, because it's deeply entrenched even in the society as well?
Let me start where we are now. We have a very good architecture in the management of resources and the economy in terms of, in respect, for example, on issues that might touch on corruption. We have ESCC that would do the economic, ESCC stands for Economic and
Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission.
Yes, an Anti-Corruption Commission. That's the investigative authority, backed up or in fact concurrently or backed up by the Directorate of Criminal Investigation. These are very robust institutions. They have well-trained people. Fortunately, Kenya does not have a shortage of manpower. And then we added onto it the separated from the old arrangement an independent DPP office, who should look at where the law is being broken, assess how quickly it can move, put the resources that are needed to it in terms of utilizing this other investigative resource and his own. But it's not working like that. It is not working like that. Partly it's willful, I think it's willful sabotage. ESCC will submit reports to DPP. DPP will say this doesn't meet the grade. Return, look at it again. DPP will insist on something. DCI will think it's not that important. They have other things to do. I think we must get them to work well. The architecture is correct. The functioning is not. Two, I think we have too much state interference. Here you can't charge. It's difficult to charge in court a government CS or PS or any big bureaucrat in this country. France charged their ex-president Sarkozy as soon as he left office. He may have to serve some actual jail time in the 15 months that he has to serve. South Africa, despite the support ex-president Zuma may be getting, he may end up in there. They're much more robust in their implementation of the law. Yeah. But you know, in every country there are those who benefit. There are people, when problems in the US with the former president, there are very many who thought that was just the best thing that God had done since creation. And they are very straight. You look into their faces, they seem to believe it completely. In this country, though, we have also people like that. We are a country in which patronage really thrives, and I think does interfere with the normal function. So corruption needs to be slayed, but only by demonstration. And I'm not saying get the most senior person just to demonstrate, and don't just catch the chicken chiefs, chicken thieves. Yes. Look at how difficult that is. That happens all the time. They do get sentenced, filling up jails, when the white-collar criminals are just walking the street right from the county levels and lower, all the way to the top. We have real problems in those layers with the corruption. So the president, in talking about it, was, I think, a clear manifestation that he's frustrated. There's an issue that he's not himself coping with. So in a sense, he expects us to have an outcry. If we truly feel that we are lacking services, we can't be silent around corruption. Okay. And but the last thing, the salvation we're going to get around corruption in some aspects, particularly now in the health sector, with the funding we get from the Global Fund, they're not going to let us off the hook. And there have been several times when the health sector has been unable to account for the resources they get. This was the first time. Also, at the same time, because we have this arrangement with the IMF, and there are certain milestones that have to be met, they are not going to relent. Okay. But that's only a short phase in our life. We may be able to cope, and then when they leave, we just rush back to our old ways. But we must get away. Otherwise, we can't survive as a nation and have a voice in the world if we are always begging and misusing what we get. And the hardships we have are major. We don't have social assistance programs. As a KEMSA, billionaires are there, and then they go in front of you on the TV every day after they have stolen. You know how annoying that is? Very annoying indeed. So I really hope that at some stage we'll begin to break the cycle by catching the thieves and not waiting for them to finish. NYS was, I think, 2015, the first NY, not the first, but the one that was major recently. If it's going on, it's very silent. Nobody knows what's going on. It may not even be going on. People may just be waiting for witnesses to die or documents to get lost. Like you saw the other day, talk about corruption. That cases relating to gender violence, the rape cases and so on, in the post-election violence, the documents have disappeared. That's what probably they're waiting for in this case. We can't tolerate that kind of setting because we shoot ourselves not really in the foot, we shall shoot ourselves in the knee.
Martin Zawino, add your voice to this. He brought up issues to do with health, and perhaps sitting in the health committee, you might be in a position to adequately inform us. What's your take on the vaccination drive in the country? I was looking at first world countries. The US right now is focusing on going back to normal. The UK, Boris Johnson is drawing up a plan. And even though we might be worlds apart, I think that should be the area of priority, going back to normalcy, because at a time like right now, we shouldn't be withholding people from going to churches and the likes. Focus should be on vaccination. Do we have our focus right from where you sit?
You're right, Rogers. This has been a pain for us in the health committee because we know what should be done, and we don't see it being done. Number one, there was something we called a Abuja Declaration, which our states joined together and really agreed that the minimum for funding health sector should be 15%. Other countries, even in Africa, 1 or 2, 3, have implemented this. That means you look into all the spheres of health, both preventive and curative aspect, and fund them well so that you are not caught in a crisis. Because we know epidemic will come. Corona today, there's another one tomorrow coming. But we are not prepared as Kenyans. The other thing I want to add is that we don't wait for people to get sick in order to respond to them by intervening biomedically. That is where we go wrong. We need to put more money in preventive aspects. That is including even the community health worker and the household scheme and dispensary health centers and also level 4. That is where we need to invest. But right now, those infrastructures are very fragile. You hear people not even accessing oxygen because of in preparation. So what I'm trying to say is that as for vaccination, what we ought to have done even before this epidemic is to empower our institutions. We have a very important institution called KEMRI. KEMRI is a research-oriented institution. We could produce our own vaccine. We don't need, it's a global network, yes, but we could manufacture our own vaccine right here in Kenya. And I see Tanzania is even making a very fast move. And remember, they were the ones who are very reluctant with this corona. So we missed the step, but we should act now. Give KEMRI more money. And we said, if little, invest even 50 billion so that we can manufacture little things like swabs and all this, which we are importing and all that. Right now, less than 2% of Kenyans have access to the first dose, which have also limitation. Now, first dose, if you have it, just restricts you not when you fall ill, not to be so serious to get in ICU, but still you can be infected. Yeah. That second dose is still way for, and now we are talking about mixed match, which is okay, it's being scientifically correct. If we cannot get it, we can bring in others. But what I'm saying is that we are ill prepared. By now, we should have been talking of 20 to 30 million people in order to get that herd immunity, which is stable for any country to relax. Lastly, I would say the vaccination is far-fetched. It will take us time. At the same time, I ask Kenyans, please, the only vaccination, and I say again and again, to protect us from this disease is those 3 protocols which the minister put in. Just mask, put your mask correctly. And then social distance as well as washing hands. Those, even if you are vaccinated, should go hand in hand because you can still be infected even if you are vaccinated, although the seriousness is what we are talking about here may be a bit milder. And you can still transmit even if you are vaccinated. That is what it is. Okay,
well noted, Martin Zowino. After the break, we still have Kevin Osido with us. We'll definitely take a look at various developments around this. Of course, the government did set an ambitious vaccination project at the target by the end of this year over to next year rather. The US had set 70% as the vaccination target, but they have taken a step back in terms of filling up in those numbers. They failed to hit that target. So we'll definitely come back with that, even as we interrogate the politics of development. The president was, as of yesterday and today, supposed to be in Ukambani to launch various national projects in terms of the national